welcome to the podcast, Wait, What Do You Do Again? Where we talk to everyday people doing amazing things. I'm your host, Megan DeFord. Let's go. Today we're talking to Carol Aguirre, a vegan weight loss nutritionist. Today we're talking about vegan diets, Ozempic, body image, and she happens to be running the Chicago Marathon in a few weeks. Enjoy. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited about our conversation. Can you tell us what you do and how you came about to do it?
Sure. So I'm a dietitian that happens to be vegan. As far as being a dietitian, I've been a dietitian for, definitely over 16 years. I forget the actual number. As far as being vegan, that took a little while until that actually happened. Turning 100% vegan. That was definitely a process. Probably in my 20s, I wanted to be vegan when I was in college. The first time I ever heard the word vegan, it was a classmate. One day she came into class. She was like, "I'm vegan." I'm like, "What is vegan? What do you mean by that?" She goes, "Oh, why don't you read this book and it'll introduce you to it." So I'm like, okay. So I read the book. It was A Diet for New America, John Robbins, like the Baskin Robbins guy. Him. That book is really, really old. It's definitely dating my age, but so I read it and I was like, I'm going to be vegan. Like I read the book in one day. I was like, I'm vegan now. And so I'm in 20 years old at that point. And so I decided to do it all wrong because I had no idea what I was doing. I mean, I was a dietitian, I was in school and back then I was on the school meals and some of the food was tofu, which was vegan, but it was just blocks, cubes of tofu with no flavoring. And I was like, that's disgusting. I'm not going to eat that. So I ate all fruits and vegetables and I was like, yeah. And I got really, really, really sick and skinny, sickly skinny, scary skinny. And then I came home it was Thanksgiving break and my mom was like, what happened to you? I'm like, I'm vegan. So she's like, no, you look like you're sick. I'm like, no. And so that was the end of me being vegan probably in college. And then flash forward years later, I was like, I think I'm going to try doing this again. And so I did, but I couldn't give up seafood and cheese for the longest amount of time, just because I really like seafood and cheese was I love it. Cheese. It took me a really long time to finally be okay, I'm not going to eat cheese. Cheese was I can't be vegan. And a lot of people say that, but now I'm okay, I'm going to finally do this. So I finally did it 9 years. So now, and then as far as I can't live without cheese. That's so far removed in my mind. But I feel like that's such a lot of people get stuck with that, the whole cheese thing. They're like, I love cheese. How do you do it? Yeah, I think I felt that way once upon a time. But as I got more into the world, vegan world, I was like, no, it's not that bad. And why am I vegan again? You have to remember why you're even doing this in the first place.
So that's I have a lot of questions. That's really fascinating. And when you were sickly skinny in college, did you feel sick or did you feel okay? You were just losing a lot of weight.
I felt fine, but I'm also so young. At 19, I think you could do all kinds of crazy diets and be like, I'm fine. But now at my age, no, I wasn't fine.
Yeah.
I wasn't eating enough at all.
Yeah. Got it. And then what did the book say that inspired you to follow veganism?
So I think back then it was what really happens to animals in a slaughterhouse. And so I'm 19 reading this book. I'm like, wow, that's crazy. I don't want to hurt any animals. Back then I was like, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to eat animals anymore. And it was just literally just like that overnight. I'll be vegan.
Let me ask this question. Can you define what is the difference between vegetarianism and veganism?
Sure. So vegetarianism, saying that right?
Or vegetarian,
vegetarian. They eat dairy. It just kind of depends. Someone could be lacto-vegetarian or octo-vegetarian. And so maybe they incorporate, or pescatarian, so they just eat fish. But vegetarian, I think most people would know the term, is just incorporating dairy, but excluding all kinds of other animals. So cow, milk, cheese, yogurt, cottage cheese, things like that.
Gotcha. Cool. And then it seems like there are so many different diets and plans to follow. And if someone wants to make a change, where do they even start? how do you know what works for your body and what doesn't work for your body? And is there a general sense of this, and this diet tend to be the healthiest overall?
I think it's individualized. And as far as wanting to go plant-based vegan, like I don't think anyone should do that for weight loss. You're doing it for all the wrong reasons. It's just going to fizz out really fast. There needs to be like, well, what's your why? Like, why would you even want to go vegan? So there's a little bit more thought process behind that term and to actually follow through with it and be committed to it. As far as like what's right for the individual, I think an average individual who doesn't want to be vegan, um, understanding like what are proteins, what are carbs, and what are fats. So it's not really a diet, it's more of a lifestyle and just understanding the basic knowledge of nutrition. And I think most individuals don't have a lot of nutrition. Like maybe they took like a basic nutrition class in college, if that. Right. And it's, I mean, that's fine. I mean, I think that's a great class if you pay attention to it. It can also be something that you just want to get through. But I think that's a great class taking it in college. And that's a good, like a baseline place to start. And on social media, like Instagram, TikTok, even if you Google it, there's all kinds of things that you're seeing and reading. You're like, well, what the heck am I supposed to follow? It's so overwhelming. I mean, sometimes I scroll at night on Instagram. I'm like, what the hell? If I didn't know, if I wasn't a dietitian, I'd be like super confused because there's so many different thought process and different things. You're like, well, who am I supposed to believe? And there's all kinds of opinions out there and influencers out there that have like millions of followers. And I'm like, you like suck. Like some of the things that you're trying to promote, it's pretty scary. And I think a lot of young girls can be so vulnerable to some of these social media influencers that are young girls in their 20s acting like they know what they're doing. And it's like they don't know what they're doing. What some of the things that come out of their mouth. I'm like, and a young girl who's like 12, who's so impressionable. I think like back in my day when I was 12, even there was no social media. It was like magazines that I was like, oh my God, this is like, I want to be like her. But now it's like social media. And these young girls are listening to this, what these influencers say, that a lot of them don't know really what they're talking about. And so
There's someone who will be 42 this year. I'll be on TikTok or Instagram, and there are some trusted people that I follow, but then you get fed other things. And you can see that there are influencers who clearly have eating disorders and they're promoting it and they have thousands of followers and it's really scary, but they sound like they know what they're talking about. And so as someone who did not take a nutrition class in college, who only had sort of like the pyramid that the government put on like the back of a cereal box, things like macros and counter carbs and all this stuff can be confusing. Like, what would you say is a good place to start? I know for myself, I have looked at my diet and I'm like, whoa, I eat a lot of meat. But then I'm like, am I eating a lot of meat? Or, I definitely need more vegetables, which I always need more vegetables. I was not someone who grew up enjoying vegetables, and vegetables were always sort of a side dish and had butter and cheese and that kind of stuff with it. So like, what would you say is a good place? Is it the library? Are there any, like, can people follow you? Are there other people that you would be like, this is a pretty good place to start if you're trying to figure out just how to eat cleaner? I shouldn't even say cleaner, if you're trying to eat healthier.
Yeah. So a good place would be the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. It's like the board, I guess, for me, for being a nutrition dietitian. That's a good starting place. I think that's basic knowledge, like basic nutrition to get you started. And there's a lot of like education that comes behind, a lot of like studies, like research articles, research studies that are going, if they're promoting something, it's because there's science to back it up. It's not just some girl, some influencer on social media, which unfortunately a lot of people do take advice from, which is really disappointing. But that's just the times we live in now.
And then if someone is considering, for whatever reasons, whether it is because they don't like meat or because they are morally opposed to it or whatever, religious reasons, whatever, to become vegan or vegetarian, it seems like often there is a mental block with that. How would you recommend someone start doing that? Is it something that you ease into, or is it something that you can just go full force? What would What would your recommendation be with that?
Yeah, I definitely would recommend someone go slowly, and then that way it's not so overwhelming. Trying to do it all like overnight is not probably the smartest thing to do, just because it's so overwhelming. So maybe the first thing would be like remove one of like red meat. That would be an easy start, and just making some easy swaps. And then maybe then do that for a few months. And then the next thing would be remove poultry. So little at a time. So it's not so overwhelming, because it can be overwhelming if you're trying to just go from one day to the next. There's so many products these days. It's pretty crazy. Like vegan, everything, like anything you want. Like I saw some vegan eggs. They look just like eggs. I haven't tried them, or I don't know the nutritional content of them, but it's crazy. Like there's everything these days that are veganized if you want it. And it doesn't mean it just because it's vegan. And I think sometimes this is a misconception that just because it's vegan, it's got to be healthy. It's so not the truth, because there's so many vegan products out there. They're just as unhealthy as something that's not vegan. So that is such a misconception. It really is, because it's just because it's vegan. It's so not necessarily going to be better for your health.
So the plant-based hot dog that I had at IKEA is not healthy for me.
Maybe. So this is where like looking at labels and like understand. I mean, it may or may not be. I'm not sure. I know there's an IKEA hot dog. I kind of forgot about that. But this is where, as consumers, I think it's really important to understand like what you're looking at if you're in the grocery store, looking at the label, the nutrition label. What am I supposed to look for? And when it comes to the ingredients, well, what am I looking at in the ingredients? Like you could be looking at it, but what about it? So understanding some of the basic things to get you started, I think is really important. You can get that information from that site, the
Mhm.
Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. They'll teach you online like how to read a food label and what to be focusing on. I think
Yeah.
that's a great starting place.
Yeah. I think I was shocked when I had my son, who's now 14, but when he was a baby, he had a dairy soy egg allergy, and I was nursing, and
Wow.
the dairy and the egg was not an issue. The soy was in everything.
Okay.
I mean, it was in everything. And I'm not a big label reader, but I was really shocked um, when you start reading labels. And not all, I kind of looked at labels for sugar. I never looked at other ingredients, and I was really surprised at that. So if you're just a general person in the grocery store, like what are processed foods?
So anything that's altered from its natural state is going to be considered processed. So that means even something like a salad kit that you would get at Trader Joe's, like that would be considered processed. So, like it's such a blanket statement processed. So it's not necessarily that it's like a salad kit really isn't bad for you. Like I wouldn't say that's something that I would want to avoid. I think things that are maybe ultra processed is probably, I think, where I would be cautious of and start recognizing, well, what do you mean by ultra processed? So maybe something like Beyond Burgers, they just reformulated, by the way, which is kind of interesting. They lower their saturated fat content, which is kind of cool. Not a big fan of it though, but I did try it just for the sake of trying it. But um, things like that, I wouldn't necessarily encourage that to be someone's staple to have like Beyond Burgers every single night. But I think once a week, maybe if you like them and enjoy them, then yeah, incorporate them. Like I wouldn't avoid it either. These ultra processed foods items. Just be aware of how often and how much you are consuming of these products. I think is it's healthy this way versus trying to completely like I can't eat ultra processed foods because it's going to make me sick. Well, that's just being really unrealistic. Because what happens if you're in a barbecue or you're in a social setting and you're like, see these food items, you're like, well, maybe I want, oh no, but I can't. So I'm trying to be like ultra clean or ultra healthy. So that's where some individuals just take it like a little too far. Like there needs to be a happy balance when it comes to these food items.
And something you said, like going to a barbecue and having that as an option. Do you find that holidays are difficult for people who maybe have transitioned to veganism or vegetarianism because that's not what they grew up with? And like, what are maybe some tips if you are, craving dairy or craving something else, so that people can work through that?
Yeah, I think at the beginning the cravings are really normal, not uncommon at all. There's things, I mean, you could like veganize your favorite dish. Like let's just say it's it's turkey, it's Thanksgiving. So make a vegan version of it. If it's like cheesecake, make a vegan version of it. You can do that. And this is why I would encourage anyone who wants to go vegetarian, vegan, or even like sometimes vegan, sometimes plant-based, is do it little at a time, because those cravings, I think at the beginning will happen. And then you got to remember, well, why do I want to be vegan? Why do I want to be plant-based? Why do I want to be vegetarian? Like, there's got to be a reason for it, because if not, this is why I said you got to remember why you're deciding to eat a certain way, because you just wanting to do it. Well, that's just going to go out the window really fast.
I would imagine finding a community of others who are also vegan is probably helpful as well.
It helps. I think also sometimes it can be a little isolating for someone who like are the only one, like I'm the only one that's vegan in my whole family.
Right.
Like it's not any more isolating, but I think at the beginning with my family it was like, well, what are you going to eat if you're not eating turkey? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? What am I going to eat? Like, it could be so easy, but at the beginning it wasn't that easy. I was like, I don't know, what should I eat? Like, it was a little odd, but you can, I mean, having a community is definitely helpful, because you can bounce off struggles and like just hear other people who are in the same position that you are in. So it feels good to have someone else say it out loud, or you read a message on Facebook and they're like, oh my God, they're going through exactly what I'm going through. I think that's really helpful to have a community. So it's like supportive along this whole process.
So you are a runner and you are a distance runner. How do you fuel for that type of activity?
Sure. So before doing my long runs, I'm going to make sure I have some sort of carb. And if it's not a long run, I make sure when it's dinner time that I'm having for sure like a protein, some vegetables, a fat source, and then definitely a carb source as well.
Gotcha. And do you have any races coming up that you're training for?
I do. I am actually doing the Chicago Marathon, which is coming up right around the corner. It's October 13th, which is really exciting. Um,
Nice. Are you running it like individually? Or are you doing a charity that you're supporting?
I am. I'm going to be doing a charity. So I'm going to be representing the Ronald McDonald House Charities.
Nice.
Um, and so basically, what this is, it helps families cope better and focus on the needs of their child that's sick, like in the
Yeah.
hospital. It's going to allow them the ability of families to spend more time with their child, interact with doctors, and to make like basically important decisions about their kids' care.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What an incredible resource. That's awesome that you're raising money for them. I didn't know until I started running that people run for charities in marathons and raise money for them. So, um, I will include the link to your charity. So if anybody's interested, they can certainly support you there, and as well as all your other information too,
Yeah.
on megdeford.com. And that's really awesome. If you told me that I would had to be vegan and a runner, I wouldn't understand how that works. But the way that you break it down that way makes it so much more accessible. You know what I mean? Like, and um, it just really changes your perspective about it when you take sort of the restrictive idea away from it and you're just talking about the actual food source. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
itself. Yeah. So, two questions. Like, when should someone work with a dietitian? And what does that look like when someone comes to you? What does that work look like that you're doing with your clients?
Yeah. So my world is weight loss. So if someone wants to lose weight and they're not sure what to do, or they've been trying for so long and they come to me like, I eat super healthy and I work out, but I can't lose weight. I'm like putting weight on, like, which is probably the most common that I hear. And they're confused and they're frustrated and they don't know what to do. I think then the good time to hire a dietitian who specializes in weight loss, or if they want to go vegan and they're not sure how to do it and they would like to lose weight, I think that's something that I could help out with, because it can be really overwhelming just seeing everything out there on social space, whatever it may be, whatever platform. It is overwhelming, or maybe you don't want to do the homework yourself and you want someone to tell you exactly what to do. I think a lot of individuals want that. They don't have the time, the energy to do it. Then I think that's really helpful to hire someone to help you out throughout the whole process, throughout the journey.
So, are you when you are intaking a client, you're obviously asking their why and what are their goals for losing weight? Why do they want to lose weight? All that kind of good stuff. And then are you actually like building menus for them, or what does that look like? Are you holding them accountable to
Yeah.
eating X amount of fruits, or what does that look like?
Yeah. So it's basically teaching individuals how to eat. And so it's not really following a meal plan. Like that's just not my thing. I mean, I do sell meal plans, but it's really, you're not going to learn if you're following a meal plan. Like what happens if you're out on a social, like it's a barbecue or you're out at a restaurant? Then if you're following a meal plan, like what are you supposed to do then? Right? Like that's just not real life, I feel like. And so understanding how to eat, like what's a protein, what's a carb, what are vegetables, what are healthy fats, and how much am I supposed to eat it? So I'm all about, I'm not into counting calories or macros. I'm all about understanding what's a, like in vegan world, like what's a balanced plate, what's a balanced snack combo, and then portion sizes depending on the individual. Like, well, what are they doing for workout and what is ultimately the goal? So it's just going to be, that's how it would be personalized is the portion sizes. And I have an app. It's called Healthy. And so what happens is the individual is going to log their meals, and me and the client, we would have one-on-one calls. We would go over their meals to make sure they're on point and they're feeling good with the options. And then we have one or two goals on the call. It's a focus. It's a really big focus in my program on habits. And so the program's 13 weeks long. So little at a time, we're working on habits. And so this can be their lifestyle and a way of life. So when we're done working together, they can continue on. It's not that they were just working together for 13 weeks and they're going to lose the weight. And it's like, all right, bye, let me go eat the way I was eating. It's more about like understanding how this can be their everyday life a year from now. And there's a little bit of a group component also, and they get like self-paced video, like a course, like video modules. And so that helps them throughout, like in between support. And then the private Facebook, they get a whole bunch of recipes and some workout plans if they wanted to use that, if they're kind of new to working out as well. So then that's kind of like what my program entails.
Do you find, is there any commonality that you see between clients when they're coming in as to why they're not losing weight? Is it overeating, undereating? What tends to be sort of the issues that people are facing?
Yeah. So the most common thing I see in the vegan world is I'm eating super healthy. I have tons of cravings and I overeat at night, but I work out 6 times a week, but I'm not losing weight. Like those are the most common things I see. And I like see what they're eating. I hear it. I'm like, oh, well, you're forgetting like protein. And so like a lot of individuals are using like beans as protein. If someone wants to lose weight, that can be a little tricky. So that is definitely 1,000% the most common complaint that I hear, or their struggle. I shouldn't say complaint, their struggle that they have along the journey of weight loss.
Yeah, it seems it's interesting because I think there's probably two things going on. You have that expertise of being able to say, make this adjustment in order to meet the goals, but also you have the distance to be able to look at it versus I can't tell you how many times when I don't track what I'm eating or particularly water, I'm like, yeah, I'm drinking plenty of water. And I'm like, you've had 1 cup of water. Like you are not, so like if you don't have someone who can help you with that, it's hard to see sort of what you're actually taking in. And even just, it sounds like probably a client working with you, it forces you to pay attention to what you're really doing. And so that's really interesting. So what do you wish people knew about nutrition? What do you wish that they knew about diets generally?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be so complicated. I feel like most make it so complicated, and I feel like a lot want like a quick fix, and it's not a quick fix. It's just understanding how to eat. It can be so basic, and if I think people just got the basics of nutrition, it would be like that much easier for them. Instead of trying to do these like crazy diets, always looking for the latest and greatest diet that's going to work for them this time around. And so, and restriction, I think, is another thing that comes up. Like, I'm not going to eat chocolate ever again. It's like, no, you probably will eat chocolate again. So let's just make it fit into your life or whatever your favorite food is, because that's being realistic. You saying, I'm going to completely cut it out and this is how I'm going to lose weight is just, it's like lying to yourself. That's just not the reality.
Yeah, that's not how we live. And it's almost describing this is a good food, this is a bad food. And I don't know if you believe in good foods or bad foods. Why do you think we don't know how to eat? I mean, we're not really kind of taught how to eat,
No,
honestly.
it's just not offered. Like when I was in middle school, high school, like I don't really remember taking, like I took a health class, like PE and maybe like basic food groups, but I think that's about it. And I was like, I don't know, like maybe for a week. I think that's as far as the nutrition education I got. And it was mostly my nutrition was based on me growing up, like whatever my mom ate and
Right.
cooked. Like that was normal to me. And then I became an adult and I was like, oh, you don't really eat that healthy. But I
Right.
didn't know that back then. So I think most of us are like that though. And then they see what's in social media or like what's the latest. Like I remember, I mean, I'm sure we're not that far apart in age. Um, like low fat, low carb, like that was super low fat was really popular, I think, 3 years.
Snackwells was like
Yeah, I
the
forgot about all
thing.
that. Yeah, and like some of the people would say like Richard Simmons. I don't know why that popped in my head, but so random. But that was like our era, like
Yeah.
that, and like Weight
Fat
Watchers.
free everything. Yeah. Like
Yeah,
Weight Watchers,
oh,
fat free everything. And it was all just junk. Like it was just junk.
it was. It was kind of yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think whatever's like the latest and greatest, like that was. I think there was like studies that were saying like low fat is the way to eat, and so that was like promoted everywhere. And right now, I think right is being promoted. I still hear intermittent fasting. I still hear keto a lot. It's the carnivore diet is all over
Yeah.
social media.
I remember Atkins used to be like
That's right.
huge.
The South Beach
Um,
diet is another
yeah,
one.
South Beach
Forgot
diet,
about
all
that.
that stuff. And like you said, it's not sustainable. Like do other countries deal with this? Like, is this a uniquely American problem or
No, I don't think so. I get international clients and it's the same thing.
yeah,
Like they don't know how to eat. I mean,
yeah,
it's not super complicated, but there's no one teaching you or the individual. So of course, now you're an adult and it's like, well, how am I supposed to eat? I hear so many different things everywhere on TV, on Google, on social media. What am I supposed to do? And so it's really overwhelming. I
it
really
just
think it is.
gets yeah, yeah. It's funny. I was a really picky eater as a kid. And so I ate like white bread and Cheerios and cheese. Like that's what I ate until I went to college. And then when I went to college, I wanted to actually eat. I wanted to fit in and eat like everybody else. And I was like, oh, vegetables are really good. Like it's a really good thing. Um, but it certainly wasn't anything that was being taught. It was just I'm trying different things, and it wasn't
Yeah.
until probably my late 20s, early 30s that I was like, I should start actually paying attention to what I'm eating. Like, and do you have any thoughts on supplements?
So I think they can be helpful. I think getting labs drawn are really important. So then if you can see if you're low in something, then I'm going to take a supplement. And I wouldn't necessarily encourage everyone to take supplements just because they think they have to. Like, well, why? Like get lab values and see, are you deficient? Are you low in something? Then based on that, then yeah. Maybe if you wanted to take a multivitamin, sure, but not necessary. I don't think it's really necessary. This is where food becomes really important. Like I wouldn't want someone to be like, well, I'm going to eat McDonald's, but I'm going to take a vitamin at the same time. Like sometimes people have that thought process and I'm like, no, like that doesn't work. Like you still need to eat like correctly versus taking a supplement or taking a vitamin. So I think it depends on the individual really.
How do our nutrition needs change as we age?
It's definitely going to change, as a like adolescent, we're going to need a lot more. And then as we get older and priorities take over, I think that as we age and just what is happening in our lives. Um, so I think it just depends on the individual, like what's really happening. And also like what's happening with movement. Some individuals like walking is their movement once a week. And then I have other individuals who are like at the gym weight training like 4 times a week. So it's just going to depend on the individual. What are they doing for movement? What are their priorities at that moment in life? And so as we get older, I think our priorities fluctuate. And so it's just going to be, I think it's like individualized, really. It's not like a flat black and white answer.
Yeah. Are there certain things that you see as we age? And the answer may be no, but like as women, do we need more calcium or do we need more salt as we age or things like that? Anything that we should be looking out for? Or really, not really. It just kind of depends on your activity level and your lifestyle.
I think like vitamin D and calcium for women is really important. But calcium, you're never really going to know if you're low in calcium truly unless you get a bone density test. And I think that happening is really slim unless your insurance covers it. It's not really pricey.
Hmm.
But I think calcium is really important at a young age. Not, yes, as we age also, but I think that baseline is really important as we age. You can still take calcium as an older individual. And it's important, right, for obvious reasons, osteoporosis and vitamin D. This is where getting lab work. Some people don't need to take vitamin D and are taking like super high mega doses. And this is where it becomes scary. Like it's a fat soluble vitamin. It could be toxic if you're taking excess amount, which is why I think it's so important to get labs drawn to see where you're at, to have a baseline versus just taking pills just because you think you have to. But yes, calcium is important. I mean, iron, it depends. It really depends on the individual. Like I wouldn't want necessarily any women taking iron just because they feel like they need to because they're feeling tired. We'll get labs drawn, they'll take it just unnecessarily.
Yeah. And what would you say, you have learned the most in your personal journey in being vegan? Or maybe what has been the most surprising thing that you've learned?
That I don't miss cheese as much as I thought I did. Seriously. Because I think at the beginning I did, but I think you remember your why and why am I vegan? Why are you doing this? And then you remember, you're like, oh yeah, okay, this is why I'm doing it. So I'm vegan for the animals. That's really my rationale for wanting to stay vegan.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's the biggest thing that I don't miss. I don't miss cheese as much. Also, I mean, you can make your own cheese. You can buy cheese. There's really good cheeses these days. People would be surprised that they're definitely different. And another thing, your taste buds do adjust the longer you remove animals, like in your diet, like your taste buds 1,000% change.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting, I think. And missing food items definitely goes away with time.
Is the way that we eat tied to our ability to have access to food so readily, or does that question make sense?
Yeah. So I feel like there's delivery service now, like Uber Eats. Like you can get that if you want something instant, even though it takes 45 minutes to get there to a place. Or make something faster. But those convenient things are available. There's so many convenient TV dinners, to say it like that. But you know what I mean? Like frozen food items. I think those things are really readily available. And when you go to restaurants, I think some of their portion sizes are huge. And like McDonald's, I mean, not just McDonald's, but their portion sizes fast foods, I think, are a lot larger than they were probably when we were younger versus nowadays. And they're super inexpensive at like $1 for a burger.
Right.
But it's like the worst food. But it's just so, like readily available and it's super cheap. And so for some individuals, that just seems like like I'm going to gravitate towards that. But if you eat like that for several years, you're going to have all these other problems, which is going to cost you more money in the long run.
Right.
Which I think sometimes individuals don't get that full concept.
You can have anything delivered within an hour to your house, like literally anything. And it's very enticing, right? So you can have anything you want, right at your doorstep.
Alcohol, desserts. It's like, I want it. It's like, okay, just wait for it. And it's there. Yeah, that is interesting.
It becomes like a really easy habit. So, so what do you love the most about what you do and working with your clients?
So I would say it's really gratifying when someone like understands how to eat. And so they have more energy. They just feel better. They sleep better. They're able to lose weight and didn't realize it was that easy. I mean, it really is. It doesn't have to be so complicated, but I think we make it more complicated than it really needs to be. So that's really gratifying to me because it's changing someone's lifestyle and versus taking medication or like what's out there, Ozempic, right? Like that's the drug out there of choice, I think, for weight loss, which is crazy to me because I'm curious to see what are going to be like the long-term effects of that. And I think a lot of people are gravitating towards that again, because it's super easy, but then what happens after you lose the weight? I know there's going to be problems down the road with that medication.
The thing about Ozempic that boggles my mind is like, to what end? I mean, it's like, why do you want to be that thin? And I kind of get it for like celebrities, like that's the thing, but just regular people taking it, I'm like, it's scary. It
is. I'm like so curious not that I can't wait, but like, I'm really curious to see what happens when these long-term studies come out. Like, what
Hmm.
are the side effects? Like, what's really going to happen? Because there are going to be side effects, but they're just not available yet.
I think it's also distorting our relationship with food even more, frankly. It's, I think we already have sort of interesting, we've talked a little bit about it today, like interesting relationship to food. And Ozempic is, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, you are not eating. I mean, it's
Basically, you're
basically,
starving
yeah, you're
until
just
you lose the
not,
weight.
yeah,
So then what happens? Here's another thing. So another part. What happens when you come off the medication?
right,
Like, you still need to learn habits on how to eat properly. It doesn't just like, oh, I lost the weight and that's great. Like, I'm so excited. I'm sure like an individual who was like 50 pounds overweight and they lost weight, it's very exciting. But you still have all those issues that you had before. Well, they're still there. This is
right,
where it gets really dicey and scary and tricky. So
right.
I've had clients that have done Ozempic and they lost the weight and they're so excited and they put the weight right back on and even more because those habits aren't in place.
Right.
Then you're starting from scratch again. So
This
why
is,
put your body?
yeah, why put your body through that? And again, it's getting back to that why. And you keep saying habits. It's about good habits. It's not about like, it's about making good choices and not necessarily like chocolate is bad. It's just if you're going to have chocolate, do it in moderation and,
Yeah.
it doesn't become a habit.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and even beyond the looks, I think it boils down to how you feel is a big part. Like, do you feel confident in the body that you're in at the moment?
Yeah.
And if you're not, okay, we'll do something about it. Like, you
Right.
can do something about it. You don't have to stay at that body weight if you're not feeling confident in the way you
Yeah.
look. It's most
Yeah. And
important.
I think as women as well, that gets tricky too because I agree with you. And when I feel my most confident, it's not necessarily tied to weight, but it's like I'm eating healthy, I'm working out, like I feel strong. But I also grew up playing sports and contact sports where strength is valued, right? Because you got to push the other person out of your way or that sort of thing. I think that oftentimes when I take a step back, and I know we've talked about this in side conversations with like Botox or whatever, and I'm like, why am I getting it? Like, is it society? Is it me? Is it, it starts getting like so hard to figure out like, what do I actually
Yeah.
want to look like? As simple as that sounds, it's like, what do I want to look like? Like,
Right. And this is where I think it's like totally like what makes you happy? Do you feel confident? Do you feel good in your body? Like, there's so many questions. And so this is like all internalized and personal. Well, it doesn't have to be internalized, but it's all personalized, like
right.
what makes you feel good, kind of thing. And everyone's a little different and what they're comfortable with. Some women are comfortable being overweight. It's totally cool. Like, they
Yeah.
like it. They feel totally confident. I think that's great. And others don't want to be. Like me personally, I want to look a certain way. And
Right.
so like, I'm going to do what I need to in order to maintain that.
Right. It's why I
To
wear
make me
makeup. It's
happy.
why I do my hair the way I do it. It's like it's just interesting when you start peeling it back and you're like, do I want to look that way? Or do I want to look that way because that's what I've been taught? Or like it starts getting kind of complicated when you
It does.
when
No,
you
that's a good
take it
point. All
back.
of that.
Um, sorry, we're like totally off topic with that. But what advice would you give to your younger self, or what advice would you give to someone who is hearing this conversation, is excited by it, wants to take more control of their health? What advice would you give them as well?
Okay, so what I tell my younger self. So I was really chubby
Hmm.
growing up, and it was not fun being super chubby. And I had at the same time in one breath, my parents were like, "Lose weight. Do you want more food?" Like, all in one breath. Like, what? Like, pretty confusing. And I wish I had better role models of what healthy eating was.
Hmm.
But that's what if I could go back in time, I think I would want that to change.
Hmm.
And someone who wants to change the way they're eating, I think start looking at what you're currently doing. So that means maybe tracking your meals and not using MyFitnessPal. I don't want to track. I wouldn't encourage tracking calories. That's not my thing at all. But it's just, even if it's like a plain notebook or using the notepad in your phone, like writing down what you're eating and how much every single day, and then go back at the end of the week and just reflect and see what really happened. Like, are you eating because you're hungry? Are you eating because you're emotional? Are you eating slowly? Are you eating super fast? Like, these are questions to start thinking about. And when it comes to hydration, the same thing. When it comes to your sleep pattern, when it comes to movement, like what's happening with your movement? What are you doing? How often are you doing? Because sometimes I think we think we're eating a certain way, or just like you said earlier, like, I think I drink really good, but then when you really stop and like reflect, you're like, oh wait, no, I'm not. So the same thing goes with food. Like I can't even tell you how many times I've had clients like, I eat so healthy, and I'm like, okay, let's see what's really happening. And it's like, no, they're not. They don't even realize what's happening. So it's really important, I think, to like write down and go back and reflect and start paying attention. I think that would be a good starting place.
Mm-hmm. And then how can people find you?
Sure. So I would say my Instagram probably the largest of the platforms that I have. So I would say vegan.weightloss.nutrition.
And can anyone work with you, or do you specialize solely in vegan weight loss?
So women, so 30 plus, and they want to lose weight. You don't have to be completely vegan if you want to transition. And if you're eating something that are not vegan, that's cool. I'm not the vegan police. You do what makes you comfortable and feels good.
That's good. I'm glad you're not the vegan police. That's great. Thank you for taking the time today and for sharing your expertise.
Yeah.
We'll have all of your info up on the website so people can find you and reach out to you. And I really appreciate it. This was really fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. All right.
Thanks for listening to Wait, What Do You Do Again? For more information about today's guest, or if you'd like to be on the show, please visit megdeford.com. See you next time.